The house looked smaller than I remembered, shrunk somehow, not by time but by the weight of what it had seen. I stepped across the threshold without knocking. No one expected me to come. That was part of the plan. The hallway smelled the same, a mix of stale coffee and cold ceramic tile polished to look clean but never quite welcoming. My heels clicked gently as I walked past the coat rack, where I used to hang Emery's tiny blue windbreaker. It was gone now, replaced by a sleek modern piece that looked like it had never held anything with meaning. I moved to the study without a word. My black coat clung to my shoulders like armor. On the wall above the oak bookshelf hung the frame. It was centered, spotlighted, clearly meant to be seen. Inside, my birth certificate sat behind glass, my full name in crisp ink, birth weight, date, and the signatures of people who once swore to protect me. I lifted it down carefully, not because I feared breaking it, but because I knew exactly what would come next. Slipping the certificate out, I folded it once, then again, and placed it inside my purse. Then I reached into the inner pocket. The photo was older now, a little warped at the edges, but still sharp where it mattered, my knees on the concrete, my hands cradling my stomach, and behind me, Sabrina smirking as the door slammed shut. I slid the photo into the frame, pressed the glass back in place, and hung it exactly where it had been. Then I turned. When I first moved into Emery's house, I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured out where to go next. After selling the old place too big for one person, too quiet since Harold passed, I thought maybe living with my son would soften the ache. I thought I'd be helping, not intruding. The guest room smelled like linen spray and artificial pine. Sabrina had left a folded towel and a typed list of pantry rules on the nightstand. No dairy after 4:00 p.m., no frying, all spices labeled and returned exactly. I didn't mind. I'd lived enough life to find comfort in boundaries. But I noticed the door didn't close all the way unless you shoved it hard. It made a soft click when it latched, and somehow that click became my only privacy. Each morning I woke early, made coffee in silence, and scrubbed the stovetop even if it was already clean. Sabrina liked her eggs boiled at exactly 10 minutes. Emery liked green smoothies with spirulina. I learned the patterns. I kept things quiet. I stayed useful. They never said it, but I knew I was an unwelcome shadow in their curated space. Emery used to call me Mama. Even into college used to send me pictures of his hikes and the dogs he met on the street. Now when I spoke, he blinked slowly, like he was buffering, like he needed a moment to remember how to respond. Sabrina worked from the sunroom, noise-canceling headphones always clamped around her ears. I once brought her a cup of tea, and she looked at me like I'd stepped into a sacred broadcast. I backed out without a word. After that, I stayed in the kitchen folding laundry, pretending the house needed more tending than it did. I told myself I wasn't in the way until the day the pain started in my side. A dull throb at first, then sharp like a warning whispered too softly to hear. I bent over the sink, hand pressed to my abdomen, and waited for it to pass, but it didn't. At first I thought it might be something I ate. Maybe the yogurt had turned, or I'd overdone it scrubbing the tile floors. I told myself it would fade. I'd seen enough years pass through my body to know that most aches do. But by afternoon the pain had settled like a hot stone beneath my ribs, pulsing with a rhythm I couldn't ignore. I sat at the kitchen table, doubled over slightly, breathing through it as quietly as I could. I didn't want to alarm anyone. Sabrina had a client call scheduled, and Emery had left a sticky note that said, "Back-to-back Zooms? Please no noise." I kept the kettle off. I didn't open drawers. I didn't move. By the time the sun dipped behind the pine trees outside the window, I was shaking. Sweat clung to the back of my neck, and the pain had crawled deeper, stabbing now. Relenting, I stood slowly and made my way down the hall, leaning on the wall as I went. Sabrina was sitting cross-legged on the couch, laptop on her knees, headset on. I waited until she pulled one side off and looked up. "I think something's wrong," I whispered. "It's my side. The pain. It's getting worse." She blinked once, irritated. "Some of us have deadlines, Callista. I wouldn't ask if I stopped gripping the wall. I think I might need to go in." She didn't move. "Did you take Tylenol? I don't think that's going to help." She rolled her eyes and slid the headphone back into place. Emery came down a few minutes later to refill his water bottle. I tried again. I need help. I think I need to see a doctor. He didn't stop walking. It's probably gas. Mom, just lie down. Don't scare Sabrina. She's got a lot going on right now. He was already gone before I could answer. That night I curled into myself on the narrow guest bed, biting my lip to keep from crying out. The house fell into silence, but the pain didn't. It pressed deeper, demanding waiting. It was just past midnight when the pain tipped into something I couldn't contain. I had made it to the hallway, one hand pressed to my side, the other dragging along the wall for balance. Each breath felt like it was slicing through me. I tried to whisper his name, but it came out as a sharp cry, then another. Then I screamed. A door slammed open. Sabrina's voice cracked through the house like glass shattering. Are you serious right now? I told you I have an interview with Singapore in 5 minutes. You are not doing this tonight. I need help. I managed, crouched halfway to the floor. My knees buckled and I collapsed fully, my cheek hitting the cold tile. The pounding of feet followed. Emery appeared above me, eyes wild, jaw clenched. What is wrong with you? He hissed. You're always doing this. Always. I didn't choose this. I gasped. Please, I need a hospital. You always ruin everything, Sabrina shouted from the living room. God, just go outside if you're going to scream. Emery grabbed my arm. I tried to stand, but the pain twisted through me so violently that I fell back against the wall. That's when his hand caught my hair. Don't make me do this, I sobbed. But he already was. He dragged me down the hallway through the front door into the cold. Rain stung my face. My knees scraped against the steps as I hit the porch. Somewhere across the street, a porch light blinked on, then off. The door slammed behind me. I stayed curled there, both hands over my stomach, barely breathing, the sharpness inside me threatening to split me open. Somewhere beyond the pounding in my ears, I thought I heard laughter from inside. And then headlights swept across the lawn. The car pulled into the driveway next door. Headlights cutting across the porch like a searchlight. I couldn't lift my head, but I heard the door slam and quick footsteps on wet concrete. Oh my God, a voice said. Ma'am, are you in pain? I nodded, or tried to. My hand flinched toward my abdomen. That was all I could manage. She knelt beside me, her coat brushing my shoulder. I'm a nurse, she said, already reaching for her phone. You're going to be okay. Stay with me. You're not alone. Her name was Lorraine. I learned that later, after the ambulance lights faded into the black sky, after the cold tile of the ER, after the sharp smell of antiseptic and the blur of urgent voices. They told me it was my appendix ruptured hours from turning fatal. They took me into surgery before dawn. When I opened my eyes, the pain had dulled, but my body felt like it had been emptied and stitched together with air. Lorraine was there, sitting beside the bed, still in her scrubs. A cup of vending machine coffee in one hand and a paperback in the other. You stayed, I rasped. She looked up. Of course I did. She didn't ask me what happened. Not right away. She let me rest. She brought me water with a bendable straw and fluffed the pillow when I winced. And later, when the quiet settled between us, I asked what I hadn't dared say aloud in years. Do you think I deserved it? She didn't blink. She leaned in, brushed the hair from my forehead, and said, Nobody who deserves pain ever has to ask if they do. Her words settled into me like stitches pulling skin back together. They kept me in the hospital 3 days, though I think they knew it wasn't just my body that needed time. And when discharge day came, I didn't ask to be taken back to Emery's house. I asked for something else. When the discharge nurse asked for an address, I hesitated. Lorraine stood beside me, quiet but solid, like she'd known the question would come. She can use mine, she said, just until we sort something better. We didn't go back to that house. We didn't even drive past it. Instead, she took me to a women's shelter, nestled behind a weathered church at the edge of town. It wasn't much chipped walls, old quilts, the hum of a shared heater. But it was the first place in years where I didn't feel like I had to apologize for taking up space. They gave me a bed near the window, a bin for my few things, and a clean towel that smelled like lavender. I slept for 14 hours the first night, waking only when a woman across the room touched my shoulder and whispered, They save the good coffee for breakfast. Get it before the teenagers drink it all. There was laughter there, soft, cautious, but real. Women traded stories like currency-folded laundry with music playing from someone's phone, passed around a baby clothes, and cheap mascara like care packages. No one asked what I'd done wrong to end up here. They only asked what I needed now. The messages started 2 days later. The first was from Emery. "Mom, I don't know what happened. Just call me." Then Sabrina, "You made this worse than it needed to be. We're trying to be civil." Then Emery again. "You overreacted. We were under stress." And then 3 nights in, his voice hard and unrecognizable. "You bled on our porch like an animal." I sat in the hallway listening to that one on repeat until one of the mothers, a woman with a bruised lip, and 2 sleeping toddlers walked past me and stopped. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though I wasn't. But something shifted in me that night. Not the kind of shift that explodes, the kind that coils, tightens, learns. The first thing I did was get a library card. Lorraine helped me fill out the form, then introduced me to the head librarian, a gentle woman named Nain, with silver braids and a sharp memory for names. I started shelving books once a week, then twice, then 5 days out of 7. It wasn't a job, not officially, but they gave me bus tokens and leftover bagels from the volunteer room. More than that, they gave me quiet. In the afternoons when the building emptied out, Nayan taught me how to use the computer lab. I learned to type faster, search public record, scan documents, save files to the cloud. I'd never had a reason to before. Now I did. I created a folder, then another. I named them without emotion: messages, voicemails, letters, timeline, witnesses, every call from Emery, every email from Sabrina, every moment I could still recall from the night I was dragged outside. I wrote it all down, not for court, not for anyone else. For me, so I could stop questioning what I knew happened, so I'd never again wonder if I was remembering it wrong. They could twist the story if they wanted. I had the original. A month later, the housing coordinator at the shelter handed me a thin envelope. Inside was an approval letter: subsidized senior housing, 1-bedroom, utilities included. Move-in date the following Tuesday. I cried in the hallway and didn't care who saw. My apartment was small but clean, quiet. There was space for a small round table, a second-hand love seat, and a bookshelf someone at the library donated when they heard I'd gotten a place. I lined the shelves with novels I hadn't yet read. I labeled each cabinet with sticky notes: sugar, rice, tea. I hung a dish towel with blue stripes just because I liked it. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped checking the porch every morning. One night I sat on the floor and played back the voicemail that had once broken something in me. I listened again, and this time I saved it, filed it neatly between screenshots and transcripts, then turned off my phone. The house was warm, the night was still, and outside the snow had started to fall. It had been over 3 years since I last heard Emery's voice, but I recognized it before he even said my name. I was at the library, tucked in the back corner of the staff break room, with a lukewarm cup of tea, when Nayan waved me over with the phone. "He says it's urgent," she said gently. I took the call with a steady hand. "Mom," he started too quickly. It's about Paige. She's sick. Something with her liver. Sabrina's been staying at the hospital, and she keeps asking for you. She says you're the only one who ever really listened to her." I said nothing. "She cries a lot." He continued, then added as if it were a favor. "I think it would help if you came. You know, for family's sake. I don't know what I expected to feel. Not forgiveness, not grief, but I didn't expect the absolute stillness that spread through me like cold water. I didn't want to ask how Sabrina was, or what had happened between them. I didn't ask about the house, or if he'd ever looked at that photo I left on his wall. I simply hung up. 4 days later, a text arrived. "You always wanted to be the victim. Congrats." That one made me pause. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I'd always known. Guilt only lasts in people who want to change. In everyone else, it just curdles in, despite. I didn't reply. I filed the message away with the rest. That evening, I made soup, and ate it on the balcony, watching the bus lights blur into soft trails below. Behind me, the lamp buzzed. A book lay open on the table, and my phone's silent face down remained exactly where it belonged. The email was polite, almost clinical. They were finalizing the sale of the house, and the buyer was sentimental about family history. Emery wrote that my birth certificate, which had been framed in the study for years, was something the new owners wanted to include in a family archive. He asked if I would come sign a release form. Nothing dramatic, just a small favor, just a signature. I said yes. I arrived on a gray afternoon in early spring. The street looked smaller, the trees more bare than I remembered. I walked up the front steps with a deliberate calm, pausing only once at the threshold. Emery opened the door like he wasn't sure whether to smile or brace for impact. He stepped aside without a word. The house smelled like fresh paint and lemon polish empty in places, furniture staged for photographs, walls scrubbed of personality but not memory. "I'll take you to the study," he said. The frame was still there, centered on the far wall above the bookshelf. My name written in elegant ink behind a spotless glass. He hovered by the doorway while I approached. I took it down, removed the back, and slipped the certificate into my bag. Then from my coat pocket, I pulled the photo, the one Michael had captured from a long-deleted blog post. Me on the porch knees, curled beneath me, one hand over my abdomen. Sabrina in the background smiling mid-laugh. I placed it inside the frame, sealed the back, hung it again. Emery stared at me, speechless. "That's what happened," I said. Voice quiet but steady. Then I turned and walked past him down the hall, out the door. The air outside was cool, almost sweet. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The truth was hanging on their wall now. Let them explain it. Let them live with it. I had given them silence. Now I had given them the last word. I didn't speak on the way out, didn't glance back at the house or the man standing in the doorway. The air was lighter the farther I walked. Like each step peeled something off me I hadn't realized I was still carrying. That night I had dinner with 2 women from the old shelter. We met at a small diner on the edge of town where the booths were cracked, but the pie was warm and real. We talked about nothing important. Laundry disasters, broken heaters, how one of them had started learning Spanish just for fun. I laughed, honest, breath-deep laughter that stayed in my chest longer than I expected. When I got home, I made tea and sat on the balcony, letting the silence hum around me. Not the silence they used to throw at me like punishment, but the kind I had built, the kind I had chosen. I posted a photo from the art fair last weekend. Just me standing in front of a watercolor of trees, holding a paper cup of cider. No caption, no location, just a record of a quiet joy they'd never be part of. 2 hours later, the notification lit up. Emery North still playing The Martyr. I stared at the screen for a long moment, not angry, not surprised, just tired. Then I blocked him without a second thought. The click was soft, final. The next morning, I opened the windows and let the breeze in. My apartment smelled like sunlight and lemon balm. On the fridge, I pinned a new recipe I wanted to try. I made a grocery list. And then I reached for the notebook where I'd started writing again. Not the documentation, not the records, just words my own. The kettle whistled. I turned toward the sound, and for the first time in a long time, I felt exactly where I belonged. I started teaching a writing group at the shelter once a week. Nothing formal, just a folding table, a tin of cheap pens, and a stack of notebooks donated by the library. We called it Thursday Pages. Some wrote poems. Others wrote letters they'd never send. No one had to share if they didn't want to. One morning, a woman named Talia read a single sentence from her page voice, low, barely above a whisper. I only started breathing when I stopped begging to be heard. The room went still. My eyes filled before I could stop them. I turned away not from shame, but from the rush of knowing someone else had named it the thing I'd carried for so long, I forgot it had weight. After the session, I stayed behind to wipe the table, though it didn't need it. I poured a second cup of tea and stood by the window watching the morning unfold without ceremony. Cars passed, birds shifted in the trees, and across the street a man swept the sidewalk in slow, even strokes. Everything was quiet and still. Everything was speaking. I thought of the house of the cold porch of the night. I nearly disappeared into pain. I thought of the voice that once told me I had ruined everything, and I thought of how wrong they were. Silence isn't what they gave me. It's what I took back and filled with my own voice.